One of my portfolio companies lost $200 million 5-year government contracts. And in this video, we're gonna explain exactly what they did wrong so that you can avoid it. I'm gonna give you their background story, how we got here, what were the opportunities that we're going after, and what were the key mistakes that we made. Also, I'm gonna break down at the very end of the video what I would do differently so that you can learn from me what I did wrong and you don't have to make that same mistake. Let's go. So let me tell you a little bit about the background of the company. So this company reached out to me over YouTube, and the guy who I met, he was a successful construction company doing business in the Northeast United States, and his company had been around for the better part of 2 decades. And the problem that they're having was around them, where they're located at, was 3 military facilities, right? Based around the location, and he was here, and he could not get access to any of these military facilities. So he reached out to me and said, hey, I am one of the top Black-owned construction companies in the Northeast United States. We've got bonding, and we are having a hard time trying to break into this marketplace. And so given the fact that he had been living there for a good part of 2 decades, given the fact that he already knew that there was Groton Sub Base here, there was Newport Naval Base here, and then there was Kittery, Maine Base here, he was like, hey, how do we get access to these contracts? So given that they had bonding, they had capital, they had credit, they had good past performance, they were still struggling to break into these bases. And so what we did was we said, okay, let's take a look at, we know that you've got the bases here, but who are the actual buyers that are buying from those bases? What are the offices, right? Because the important part is not the locations, but the actual offices. And so for me, the first thing that I do is that we actually look at who are the offices buying at those locations. And interesting, that's part of what we do here in our Federal Contracting Roadmap when we help students, is that the first thing we do is we start looking at who are the actual offices that are buying those locations. So with this customer, we did our due diligence, we did our homework, and after we started figuring out like who are the offices buying in those 3 locations, then I said, okay, now that we know the offices, let's start reaching out to them. And so quickly we started picking up traction, we started getting smaller and small contracts, but that wasn't the challenge. The challenge was this gentleman at the time, they had about $20 million in bonding capacity. And so while we were getting small contracts at these locations, we first started out getting our first contract at an Air Force base in Massachusetts. Then we picked up a small contract at Rhode Island base. And then we picked up another small contract here at Groton Sub Base. But they wanted to go bigger, right? Like most people, who doesn't want to go bigger? So they want to go bigger. And so we said, okay, there's a strategy that we employ. And again, we have it here in our contracting roadmap. There's a strategy that we employ, which is working with organizations that already have contracts. So you have here, right? You've got contractors, let's call them prime, right? And they have contracts, right? So these prime guys, they already have these contracts out here. And working with prime contractors who are already working at these facilities, then we can immediately start tapping into some of the bigger projects. So remember, again, we're down here and we're getting these little projects, 1Zs and 2Zs, right? You know, and these projects, let's say they're in the thousands. And some of them are in the tens of thousands, right? And even hundreds of thousands. But they're not significant enough. We said, okay, there's some prime contractors out here that are working at these facilities, and we want to start working with some of those prime contractors. So in doing our research, we found a company, let's call it, we'll call them XYZ Company. And so we found this company who had $60 million in construction experience, but more importantly, they had bonding, right, for $100+ million. So we reached out to them and we said, okay, hey, we'd like to do a strategic partnership with you, and we want to chase after some bigger contracts. We know that you guys have access to some of these vehicles. And so what happened was we learned right away that there were some 5-year contracts coming out that were $200 million. So we said, okay, there's these 5-year contracts coming out, they're small business set aside, they're $200 million, but you have to have past performance in order to do them. And we go, okay, now remember this keyword, past performance. So we said, okay, clearly we're a new entity. And again, this is all part of our strategy and like what we follow in the Federal Contracting Roadmap. So again, you gotta have a strategy when you're doing this kind of stuff. So we said, okay, we don't have past performance. This company XYZ has past performance. They're one of the primes that we identified when we did our research and looking at who's buying these services. We had $20 million in bonding, we had history, we knew the area, we knew the location, we had a great subcontractor base. We had all the makings of a great federal contracting company. We just didn't have the past performance. So one of the projects comes out, and again, we're talking about a $200 million 5-year IDIQ. Projects are coming out, we've been tracking them, we've been doing our research. Now we're aware that these projects are coming down the pipeline. We've got our partner here, XYZ company, and we said to them, okay, we found these projects, we're tracking them. We've got all the actual boots on the ground and we can do the work, and all we need you to do is help us to qualify based on your experience, based on your past history, based on understanding federal contract rules and regulations. And so they say, great, yes, let's go after it together. So we decided, okay, we're gonna team up, right? So we're gonna call them, like I said, XYZ company, plus we're gonna just call my company Evan. So we team up and we're gonna go after this $200 million 5-year contract. Boom. So now we decide to team up and start pursuing the opportunities. Great. What happens is we, meaning me and my team, again, this is one of our portfolio companies, so we're representing all of their best interests. So I have their history, I have all their information. So we decide, okay, we're gonna put together the packages, we're gonna look at what are the requirements, and that's the first thing that we do is we start pulling out requirements. We actually help assist. The good thing about working with one of these larger companies, so they had write-ups on previous documents, they had things they had already won, so they knew how to put together the packages. So that was one of the advantages of working with them, was that they actually knew how to put together these packages. The good thing about us was that we had boots on the ground, so having them know how to put together the packages, we were able to align some of our subcontractors and other vendors and integrate them and their skill set into the package, so it made for a great combination. So what happened? The first thing that happened was, okay, we are working with a representative from the company, and that representative is sort of like the guy who's got his responsibility is to push the button and submit. And so that's great. His responsibility is to push the button and submit. So it's probably 9 to 10 people per call, or reviewing these documents, reviewing the packages, making sure we meet the requirements. And so we're having these meetings. They first initially start out bi-weekly, then it went to weekly, then it went to twice a week as we got closer and closer to the due date of the submission. And on the first submission, we decided, okay, I got a proposal manager, we put everything together, it's ready to go. And so we submit, and this is wonderful. So we submit the package, and what happened was the government actually gives us an opportunity. They look at the requirements and say, okay, there was a mistake made in some of the requirements. They take everyone's packages, they give it back to them, and they said, okay, everyone who submitted on this 5-year contract, you need to include in your write-up these items and make sure that you explain these sections better, right? So let's say, for example, in the government's write-up, they're like, how are you gonna handle throwing away or getting rid of like recycling materials, or getting rid of like trash removal, things like that the government wanted more clarity on. And so in the requirements, they said, explain how you're gonna address these issues, and they gave it to everybody. And then when you resubmit the package, we would like for you to address those specific items, but make sure to also include your original package. On the first 5-year contract that we submitted, we did that. So we went ahead and said, okay, these are the 4 items. So we wrote in our explanations for what we're gonna do to address these new items. When we went to go and resubmit it, the representative from XYZ company, when he went to submit that second time, he submitted the new items, right? So let's say we had the old stuff and we had the new stuff. So he submitted the new stuff, but he forgot to include the old stuff. And so even though we addressed the 4 key areas that they wanted us to address, we did not submit the old items with the new submission, and so hence we were deemed non-responsive and thrown out of the particular bid. So interesting enough, we spent all this time and effort putting together this package, only to find out that at the end of the day, we were deemed non-responsive because we did not submit the old documents with the new package. Mistake number 1. On the second opportunity that we got, and it's interesting because 2 of the opportunities, one was up here in Maine, the other one was actually here in Rhode Island. The other opportunity that we received, we said, okay, because they're both coming out of the same offices of the Navy. These were Navy 5-year contracts. Because they're both coming out of the same office of the Navy, we've got it. We knew what to do. They were literally identical in nature. We had already submitted one. Even though we lost it, we said, okay, we know what to do the second time around. So we had already the packages, which is great, right? Because if you learn how to do this stuff, selling to the government, once you figure this out and how to do it, it makes it easier because you've likely already done this once before. So the second time around, we said, okay, we've got it. We know what to do. Again, same company, XYZ and Avankov, we're putting together the team. And we're like, all right, we got this. We figured it out. We hit all the key points. Everything in our submissions are great. So what happened? So now the second time around, we decide, okay, we're gonna submit. The second one, we get ready, we submit well, again, when I say we, I don't push the button because remember, since they are the prime on this opportunity, we don't get a chance to submit. We put the package together with them, but they actually have to push the button. And so we go forward, they submit, great. And then, a month goes by, we figure out we don't win. We say, well, what happened? So we asked for a debriefing. Now remember, the first opportunity was here in Maine. The second one is in Rhode Island. So we get on a call with the government and they said, listen, we love your proposal. Your proposal's great. Everything about it was amazing. There was just one thing. And we said, what was it? They said, you submitted late. And we said, that's impossible. How could we have submitted late? Well, it turns out that we submitted, or the company submitted, the actual bid itself with the package on time. They forgot to include, because this was a requirement, their subcontractor's teaming arrangement with that particular bid. So even though they submitted the actual bid on time, the subcontractor teaming arrangement, which was a requirement for the bid to deem you responsive or non-responsive, they submitted that late. We were thrown out. So one of the things I like to say for people is, it's really important when you're working with teams, especially on something like this, because these are 5-year vehicles. So if you say right now we're in 2024 and this is a 5-year contract, it lasts till 2029, you don't have the opportunity to get onboarded to that opportunity for 5 years. So what would I do differently? What I would do differently moving forward is I would make sure that if I'm working with a teaming partner, that we are on a Zoom call or a Google Meets call or some sort of call on the day of submission, making sure that they push the button together. If there's a follow-on submission, we would make sure that we were on some sort of Teams call together, watching them push the button. Not because people are bad people, but there's a term that says trust but verify. So for me, what I'd encourage you to do, especially when you're working on something that's a multi-year contract, that's a long-term vehicle, if you're gonna work with a teaming partner and they're responsible for submitting, make sure that, and it's particularly if you're the one that has the institutional knowledge, you're the one that knows, you have boots on the ground, and you understand the projects better than that teaming partner, and you feel like you're the one that have more of an interest. You're the one that has more at stake, right? Because you're the small guy, you're trying to climb up. They're already a big fish. They're already making money. They're already successful. So you're the one that has more to lose or more to gain from winning this opportunity. Make sure that you're invested. Make sure that you're on the call. Make sure you're setting up a meeting the day before. Make sure you're following up behind the submission. Make sure you're seeing and verifying that when you submit, typically something electronic, there's a code or some sort of number that comes back. Make sure you've got that number. Make sure that you've shown proof. Make sure there's some sort of confirmation that it was received by the government. Make sure that all the documents been in. So if there's anything that you can try and control all of the variables that you don't have control over, meaning, like you said, and now pushing the button by being there, being on a call, being with a team member, asking if you can help, even if you could be at their offices, if you're physically close by them, so that you can ensure that you don't lose out on a 5-year opportunity. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I did. That's one of the things that burned me. And so again, I don't want you to lose out on 2 5-year, $200 million contracts where at least we could have pulled down tens of millions of dollars in opportunities for ourselves, which equate to hundreds of thousands of dollars for us personally, millions of dollars in revenue. And so we would just, by literally not being on top of it and trusting the other party, we're the ones that had everything lose. Thanks, I hope you learned a lot from this video.